In this video module, you will understand the rubric used to score the Grade 7 Cornerstone Task and understand how to score the task. First, it is important to note the Cornerstone Task is meant to be a formative assessment and not a summative assessment. Formative assessment is a range of formal and informal assessment procedures conducted by teachers during the learning process in order to modify teaching and learning activities to improve student attainment. For our purposes, the Cornerstone Task is a more formal formative assessment that is administered and scored to determine student mastery of the transfer goal. In the case of the Grade 7 Cornerstone Task, the students are asked to demonstrate mastery of transfer goal number 4, communicate and support ideas effectively to address a particular audience and purpose. As teachers, you don't necessarily have to assign a grade in the grade book for this formative assessment, but you will need to use the rubric to assign students a score. These scores will help guide your instruction and give you an idea of whether or not students have mastered the transfer goal or if reteaching will be necessary. While the Cornerstone Task rubric is written using some advanced language, it is possible for all students to understand the rubric and be successful on the task according to the requirements of the rubric. First, in order to access the Cornerstone rubric, you should go to the Module 2 Population UBD template. Scroll down to Stage 2 Evidence. Under Evaluative Criteria, choose the link to the Cornerstone Task rubric. Once you click this link, the rubric should open. When understanding the rubric, you should first understand that no one is expecting all or even any students to exceed expectations in every single category. Ideally, your students should aim for this category, but most students will complete the task in the meets or approaches expectations area. The transfer goal is the first assessed aspect of the rubric. You should score the student's final product on the transfer goal last, because ideally, wherever they fall in the other aspects of the rubric will give you a pretty good idea of how well they have mastered transfer goal number 4. For example, if the student approaches expectations in all other aspects of the rubric, then they are approaching mastery of the transfer goal. When you explain this rubric to students, which you should do upon introducing the task to students, you may want to draw their attention to the bold words. These bold words are essentially the action words that will clue students in on what they need to do to meet those expectations for the rubric. For your more struggling learners, you may also want to work with the rubric more in depth by coming up with some additional more student-friendly language to help them. For example, if you view the first standard under the transfer goal and you look under meets expectations, it states, alternate and opposing arguments are adequately acknowledged or addressed. A more student-friendly way to say this might be, list and explain the pros and cons of your proposed solution. When scoring each student's work, it is important to review the 7th grade Cornerstone Task rationale found in the Cornerstone Task Teacher resource. Note that for students to receive a meets expectation score for the Maryland Skills and Processes Standards, as well as the writing standards, their final product should include most or all of the components listed below each standard of the rationale. Once you and your students understand the rubric, you may want additional information about how to score the task using the rubric. In order to see student exemplars with information about how these exemplars do and do not meet the expectations of the rubric, you can access the 7th grade Cornerstone Task Anchor examples, which are linked on page 2 of the Teacher Resource Guide. If you have any additional questions about understanding and or scoring the Grade 7 Cornerstone Task, you should contact your content specialist.